Okay, and we were live. Welcome to Unsolved in Hawaii. I'm going to go ahead and put up our disclaimer real quick. There we go, just for a second. So everyone can see that the videos that represented in the videos represent the opinions from families in each case. Further information is research in the cases and has been provided to the families of sources and different sources in each case. There are no hard accusations. We only seek to provide the truth in each case, answer to the families in hopes that one day they will have some closure and be able to bring their family members home, or in this suspicious cases for those to be solved, um, answers. So with that being said, I'm going to go this out. We're going to welcome Judy Thompson. She's the mother of Officer Jason Thompson, who died under suspicious circumstances um, on August of 2020. Okay, so welcome, Judy.
Hi, welcome so much. There's a little bit of feedback going on. I'm not sure what that's all about, but hopefully that'll get better. Aloha, everyone. My name is Judy Thompson, and my son is Jason Thompson, and he was a police officer with the Maui Police Department. He served with them for 10 years, and on August 5th, 2020, he died of an alleged suicide. I was in my where I live part time in Florida when I got the call that my son had died, and I was told that he had taken his own life and that he had done that in front of his wife at his home. It was pretty shocking. I flew back to Maui immediately, and in the days that followed, it started to be real apparent. Even though I was in shock and obviously very distraught, that something was really wrong with the situation. Jason didn't have any indications that there was no depression. He had never had any mental illness. He had never been violent at all. He was looking towards the future. He had lots of things going on in his life, including he had just passed the sergeant's test. He was going to be having an opportunity to go into the motorcycle squad, and he was really looking forward to that. And he had also just refinanced his home, taken it from a 30 to a 15 years so that he could pay it off quicker because finances were good and they just wanted to, pay it off quicker. So they refinanced. He had just given a big birthday party for his wife for her 40th birthday, a big surprise party at the beach with lots of people. So none of it made sense. So I started to get information, and the first thing that I got was the police report in November of 2020, so a few months after his death. And the things in there just didn't add up. So, his wife was saying that he had turned off all the power in the home, and that he had turned off all the phones, gathered them, and turned them off from his children, and yet he was carrying on a text conversation for until like 8:16. So the 911 call came through at 8:37 a.m. from the neighbor. And when I got the call logs, which we can put on the screen here, those call logs, Jason was texting with a coworker, a seemingly normal conversation up until 8:16, and at 8:37, the neighbor calls and says that his neighbor has, shot himself and taken his life. So that in of itself didn't make any sense. And before I go further, I want to say that everything that I talk about is absolute facts. I have gotten the police report. I've gotten the 911 calls. I've gotten most of the body cam footage. I've gotten his call log, as you see right there. So this is where I've gotten my information. So on here, his last call, I think it's not quite on here, but there was one at I think 7:35, and he's texting with a coworker about the gym. Oh, where are you going? Oh, jujitsu. Oh, great. And the last thing he texts is 8:16. Fine. So that doesn't make any sense. His wife also says that the power's off, he's turned it off, and she's making breakfast. Again, I don't know what that really means. I mean, you can't make coffee, you can't cook anything. I suppose you could pour cereal or put some peanut butter on a bread, but so that doesn't make any sense. Um, in addition, Jason allegedly shot her phone. Her phone was shot. It was in the yard. Her story is that he went out a sliding door on the downstairs of their home, and there's a patio there. And to the left is grass and the rest of the yard. In the corner is a big trampoline. To the right side is a bunch of patio chairs, and there was a full length ladder that I had never seen there before. It's unlike Jason to leave a ladder on the ground where his children can trip on it. So we have a diagram of that as well, showing you where the sliding door is. Sorry that this is hand drawn. And all the area that's, blank is grass. And you can see where the sliding door is. And he came out of there, and instead of shooting this phone that he allegedly shot, right where all that grass is, he goes all the way to the opposite corner. And that's where the phone was shot. And we have a diagram next that shows you an actual photo from the police departments, because I got all the photos, 497 of them, of the crime scene and the autopsy. So these are actual MPD photos, some of these that you will be seeing, including this next one. So again, the person is apparently acting crazy. He's erratic. And yet he's doing these things that don't make any sense, like continuing to text somebody in a normal manner. So it doesn't make any sense at all. Yeah, and you'll see that photo coming up. There it is. So those cones indicate, in between those cones is where the phone is, or actually I think it's near the first one that says number 1. And so the sliding door is the total opposite side of this patio. So again, it just doesn't make sense that someone would do that. Why would they choose that location if they're not in their right mind? And, when you shoot a phone, what happens is it's pretty likely that that phone, no data can be retrieved from it. I researched, how do you destroy a phone? And the number one way is shoot it. And that phone was shot. And sure, you can get call logs and request those from the carrier, from the phone carrier, but you can't look up data searches and things like that. I think it's really hard to do that. So that was really surprising. And, for someone to shoot themselves and for there to be 3 shots is highly unusual. So what I want to say is everything in this case is not consistent with a suicide. So you take a suicide and maybe there's 1 or 2 things that are not consistent. Okay, it can happen. But in this case, it's almost everything is not consistent with a suicide. The next thing is that the days afterwards, the wife's behavior. So the very next day, now the children are allegedly home when this happens. And she says she witnesses him taking his life in front of her. And the very next day, she brings these children back to that house. And they still live there today. They sit in the living room and do their homework where, yeah, there's a picture of Jason. They sit in the living room where his body was. They insisted on having Christmas there. The first Christmas. I couldn't go. I just told the children, I'm so sorry, Grandma can't do it. And I just think that's cruel for them. I can just imagine what it was like that morning. In fact, you can hear some of it in the 911 call, which we'll get to later, where there's, screaming and yelling. These kids had to supposedly endure 3 gunshots, possibly seeing their father's body, all the officers responding and all those sirens. And we're talking maybe, I think it was about 17. That's pretty traumatic. And for them to be brought the next day. Her behavior also was very odd in that I was on the mainland. I got that call. I flew out the next morning. And so I arrived the next night. There's Nicole with her. That's Jason with his sister, Nicole. And when I arrived, I asked where were the children? And I was told they were at the house, meaning the house, my son's house. And I was so shocked. And I was taken to their house and there was, 10 or 12 vehicles. And had I not known what what had happened, I would have thought a party was going on. because it seemed like a party was happening. And I was like, oh my God, I can't do this. Like all these people. And that's how it was for the next 10 days. There were coolers in the garage, and those coolers were continuously filled with ice. And there was abundant alcohol and barbecues, including one 4 days after, in which, like, I don't know, 40 or 50 people were invited. I couldn't stay. I mean, it was like, I know that people grieve differently, but that doesn't make sense to me. That just does not seem normal. And drinking champagne, even days after your husband dies, I don't get that behavior. In addition to that, there's a detective who lives a couple doors down. And yeah, they were friendly and their kids played together and they carpooled for school sometimes. And she became like real close with him. And, she was drinking gin with him every night and telling us that I drink gin with him every night. And she was professionally straightening her hair. She started wearing makeup. She bought herself some jewelry and she was wearing these really short shorts. It was really odd behavior. I didn't understand it. And like I said, people do grieve differently, but it was really hard to see that as grieving. It didn't really make sense. So, we have that police report. And then the next thing that happened is a couple of months, well, it was quite a few months later, I got photos. I'm just looking at my notes. Well, I guess I'm going to backtrack a little. When I arrived that next morning, I called the police department and I asked if I could speak to the detective in charge of Jason's case. I was told they would give him a message, the detective, and they would get back to me. And I got a call 30 minutes later from the person who took the message. And he said, Detective so-and-so, who's in charge of the case, will not talk to you. He will not talk to any of the family members. He will only talk to the wife. And that is how it remains to this day. I have never spoken to any of them. Sorry, but that's like so hurtful. He was one of their own officers. So my daughter had seen him the day before. You just saw a picture of her. That's her only brother. That was his only sister. They were really close. He had stopped by her house the night before, like around 5 or 5:30. And he was in uniform. He had his police car. He sometimes did that if he was in the area. He stayed for just a couple minutes and talked story in the driveway. And they did, and he was normal and he was laughing and he was joking. And the last thing he said to her as he pulled out of the driveway was, "Love you, I'll see you Saturday," because they had plans for her to sleep over on Saturday. Again, Jason had plans for his life going forward. So he was normal how he was. So the next thing is about 7 months later, I guess it was in March of 2021, after repeated requests and filling out all the paperwork and lots of follow-up, because that's what it takes with MPD, lots and lots of follow-up. And I made sure that I was always courteous and polite in all of my correspondence, and all of my correspondence, almost all of it is via email. It's the best way to communicate. Then there's a paper trail. So I got the photos. And it was the hardest thing I've ever done, was to look at photos of my dead son. But had I not done that, I would not know that he had injuries on him that had nothing to do with a gunshot wound. And Shirley's going to put those up in a moment here. And he had injuries to his hands and one of his forearms. And those are the classic place for defensive wounds. And what's equally shocking is not only that he had those injuries, but they're not listed on the autopsy report. I talked to the medical examiner, and her answer verbatim was, I didn't list them because they didn't exist. So she's saying that the injuries that you're going to see with your own eyes don't exist. And I did a TV interview a while back last summer, and over 8,000 people have seen that video with those injuries. And the only people that say those are not injuries, or I don't know what they are people that are in law enforcement. And so this is his right hand, and you can see that there is, two what appear to be like either puncture wounds or something on the palm. When you get further out from the picture, you can even see it now. There's some blue bruising right around it. It looks like a recent injury. On the other hand, on the left hand, the entire palm area has abrasions on it. And again, what do you do when someone's attacking you? You go like this because you defend yourself. He had one little cut and it was on the index finger, and she listed it. This is how she listed it. She said a 1/8 by 1/8 abrasion on the lateral tip of the right index finger. Wow, that's pretty specific, right? 1/8 by 1/8. He had a Band-Aid on that cut. That's the only one that she listed. Yet she didn't list the one that you're looking at right now. She did not list that. And MPD doesn't deny it. They simply don't acknowledge it. They're silent. So they haven't said a word. They haven't said those aren't injuries. They've said nothing. I think that's probably what you do, right? You're silent because then your words can't come back to you. And anyway, so you're now seeing those injuries. The last set of injuries is on his forearm. I don't know what they are, but I've had many, many, many people say that they appear to be taser marks. I did reach out to an expert in taser technology. He actually testifies for Taser International, the company. And he said those wounds were, in my opinion, not caused by a Taser International taser. Now, what does he really mean by that? Well, he means that there are wounds, and he's saying it's not from the taser from his company. I don't know that. I don't know if they're taser marks. All I know is many nurses from network and ERs have said it. I know that those injuries are there. This is after Jason his body has been cleaned. Those are not blood droplets. And that's what some people have suggested that are, authority. So obviously this was very shocking. And to see and know that my son had to fight for his life. Just terrible, terrible. So, I don't know where I'm going next. I'm sorry. Yeah, so I already talked about the 8 a.m. text and all of that. So let's talk about what happened after. I'm going to talk about what happened after Jason, after the incident. So the neighbor calls, and the wife says that 3 shots have happened, and yet she never screams, yells. The houses are like 30 feet apart. If anyone in that home had screamed or yelled, someone would have heard it. And she said that the phone was shot, and then after that, Jason shot himself. Again, you've got a gunshot happening outside versus a gunshot inside. Yet some of the neighbors say they heard 1 shot. Some say they heard 2. Some say they heard 0. And the neighbor next door says he hears all 3, but doesn't call until the 3rd one. And again, you've got 2 shots supposedly in the house, and you've got 1 outside. And to me, it seems like the one outside that's hitting a metal phone would probably be the loudest. So he calls 911, and the call is really bizarre. And I want to say that, people do react differently. I'm going to, acknowledge that in an emergency, in a crisis. Some people remain calm, and I can be like that. I remain calm and I fall apart after. But his call is pretty bizarre. And so we're going to play that for you. It might take a second. Shirley's got that for me. And we're going to play the first part of the call, and then we're going to leave a gap in there because it's a long call. And we're going to go to the other part of it that's shocking. But I'll talk to each one of those.
Did you hear that okay?
No, we didn't hear anything on
Oh, it
this.
didn't come over?
Pardon?
Okay, maybe I need to unmute my mic. Hold on. That's what I was wondering. I've never shared a video before like this, so that's, give me a second here. Let me see if I can replay it.
43 seconds. 911 emergency?
My shot fired at.
Did you hear that?
Yep. That was,
Okay. I put my speaker up to the mic, so.
okay. Thanks.
Do you want me to play it again?
Yeah, you can play it one more time. That would be great. Maybe
Okay.
for the audience to hear.
Yeah, this is
Thank you.
I'm still kind of new at this, so everybody else can bear with me.
You're doing great.
Here we go. And I have, wait 1 second. Let me turn my volume all the way up. Hold on. Give me 1 second. I'm going to turn my volume on my speaker up really loud so it should come through good. Here we go.
August 5th, 2028 hours, 37 minutes, 43 seconds. 911 emergency?
My shot fired at.
Thank you. So essentially, just the first part of that is, technical, where they've got the time stamp on it. Like I said, this is officially from MPD, an unedited 911 call. And he says shots fired at, and he gives the address, which I didn't provide because, the family still lives there. But what's interesting is, shots fired is something that typically a police officer might say. However, it could be that, a person who watches a lot of crime shows or cop shows, police dramas, has that lingo. But it's just a little odd. And then he says the street address. And what's a little odd about that is that even though it's next door, they're technically two different streets. And because of that, numerically, they aren't even close. Like the neighbors is, say, 30, and Jason's is like 45. And it's because it's a different street. So that's odd that he would know it. But again, maybe he's looking at the house. Maybe he's very calm and he's looking and sees the house number either on the mailbox or on the house. So who knows? But I can tell you this, that right after he does that, and because I had to block out the address, I don't have it on here, the dispatcher actually says, "Excuse me, why are you calling?" Because this is probably a very unusual call. This isn't usually what they hear. So so that was odd. And then the next part of the call we'll play for you. And this is after she gives information about who he is. And when she said, she said, "Who is it? Who's your neighbor?" And he says, "Officer Jason Thompson." And I'm not playing this part for you. She says, "Oh my God." And every time I hear that, I want to cry because she obviously knew him and liked him. Jason was very likable. And then there's a pause for 20 seconds. I counted. She doesn't know what to say. All her training, I think, that went out the window because this is one of their officers and she's being told that he shot himself and she doesn't know what to do. So this next part is going to start there after that has happened.
Just give me 1 second here. And again, I think I'm going to have to put my microphone up to, my speaker up to the microphone.
And I'm going to mute mine and maybe that will help with the volume for you.
Okay, here we go.
Are you able to please go inside the house and check for me, please? If you can. If you don't want to, that's totally fine. But can you just
Somebody else came out and checked and.
Okay, and you sure he's gone?
Oh my God. Upstairs? Okay. Yeah, he's dead.
Okay.
Gun.
Where is the gun?
Where's the gun? Oh, it's right by him.
Okay. Just don't let anybody.
So Shirley, I'm going to ask you to play that one more time. And what I want to tell the viewers is that, she's asking him to go check if this is really true. And the first thing that happens is he says, "Well, someone just came out. They already checked." So my question would be, who is it that just came out of the house? because obviously you can hear them. The family is outside, screaming and crying. So who is it that's coming out of the house that has been in there? No officers are yet there. This is the first 911 call. Then a little bit after that, he says, not very loudly, go upstairs. In local, you would say it like that. Can I go upstairs? It's a question. So who is it at the doorway that he is asking permission from? It's not the homeowners. One of them is screaming and crying, and the other one's upstairs, deceased. And then he goes upstairs. He tells her that, yes, he is dead. And then she asks where the gun is, and he says, where's the gun? And a male voice responds, it's right by the body. Who's in the house? We'll play it again for you to hear.
Is it coming over loud and clear?
Yes, it has been. Thank you.
Okay, good. Here we go.
Are you able to please go inside the house and check for me, please? If you can. If you don't want to, that's totally fine. But can you just
somebody else came out and checked and.
Okay, and you sure he's gone?
Upstairs? Okay. Yeah, he's dead.
Okay.
Gun.
Where is the gun?
Where's the gun? Oh, it's right by him.
Okay. Just don't let anybody.
Thank you, Shirley.
You're welcome.
Yeah, so there's a lot of questions in there. Who is in the house? The victim is deceased. My son is dead, or maybe not. He could still be breathing. We'll be talking about that in a little bit. And there's a person in the house who hasn't called 911 because this is a first caller. So he's already in the house. He knows where the gun is. Who is this person? Now, I understand this dispatcher was perhaps in shock and didn't say who's in the house or ask who just came out of the house. But one would think in an investigation subsequent to that, that when they heard that 911 call, which hopefully the detectives would listen to, they would then say, wow, we need to ask this witness who was in the house and who came out of the house. Who were these other people that were there? And that never happened. It's not in the report. So, that leaves a lot of unanswered questions, and no one else should have been there. So that doesn't make a lot of sense. The next thing I want to talk about is in that 911 call, one of the things that you do not hear is a dog barking. My son had a dog, a Belgian Malinois, which is a type of German Shepherd. Those are the dogs that are typically commonly used for canine training. Very intelligent dogs. Jason was the primary master, for the dog. It was 8:30 on a Wednesday morning. That dog should have been there. That dog would have been barking ferociously. We've got, his master is on the floor. The family is screaming and yelling. There's been 3 gunshots allegedly, and you've got, all this noise. And then later in the body cam, which I won't be playing for you, there's also no dog visible and no dog barking. Again, why is the dog not there? Did someone take the dog away quickly? Which doesn't really make sense because the family's screaming and crying. I don't think that they are thinking to take the dog away. So why is the dog not there? Is there some kind of reason? Was there some kind of pre-planning? I don't know what to think. It's very concerning that the dog is not in this video and not in the 911 call. So that's very strange. So then I want to talk about what happens after this. There's one other 911 call. I don't have it provided here. It's also equally strange in that a neighbor, instead of calling 911, calls their brother-in-law, who's another cop who lives down the street. And that cop, I guess, arrives at some point, which is very strange because I see him in body cam arriving way later. So I don't understand if he's making the call, but he lives like 5 houses away, why it takes him, 7-10 minutes to get there. But again, that's another story and another thing to try to solve. So the first officers on the scene, two of them come pretty much simultaneously about 5 minutes later, 5 minutes apart. One of them is brand new. He is going to turn 24 the next day. I just discovered that because I saw his mother put something on Instagram about his birthday, and his birthday's August 6th. And he was going to turn 24 that year because he's now 26. He had probably been out of field training maybe a month, because I know when he got out of the academy, this poor guy, so he is one of the people who responds to the scene. He is the only one that documents in his report that he checks for a pulse. Nobody else even checks for a pulse. So this is 5 minutes after the 911 call. 6 minutes later, the fire department arrives. They are the first responders now that have any medical training. They are told that they cannot go and assess the body because the scene is secure. You're going to see later that that's contradictory to that scene being secure. So at 11 minutes, so it's 11 minutes now, and nobody has checked to see if my son is alive. No one has attempted any life-saving measures. And another 5 minutes transpires until the next medical people come, which is the paramedics. They are allowed to go to the body, and they do so, and then they declare that he's deceased, and they call the coroner, the doctor who's coroner, and he declares it over the phone. So someone told me that that's protocol, that the doctor who declares the death doesn't have to be there. I think it's weird, but how am I to know, right? All I know is that when the paramedics are there, they put something very odd on the form, and Shirley has the form to show you in its entirety. And then we're going to zoom in on the portion that's very, very odd. So we're just going to show you the main form briefly so that you see it is an official MPD form. And once again, everything that I use, everything that I talk about or show is official MPD. So you'll see that form, and that was filled out by the paramedics. I think it's like a certificate of death or something. Yeah, so it's a death pronouncement information. You may not see it because it's not very big, but on the bottom it says, MPD did not want me questioning spouse. So they were given specific instructions not to question the spouse, so much so that they felt they needed to note it on that form. That's very odd. Why would they not to be told that they not to question the spouse? I don't understand that. I think that's also extremely strange. All of this, was, terrible, obviously. And I'm losing my train of thought, and that's okay. Things continued to get strange, and because there were so many things that hadn't been done, our family had not been talked to, not one of us. I live on island most of, some of the time. His dad saw him the day before, his sister saw him the day before. They have their phone numbers. They're on island. There was no attempt to interview them. And there was then they didn't get any medical records for Jason. So there was a lot of things that they didn't do. They obviously did not talk to this neighbor who calls 911. It's not in the report. You think it'd be a key question of who's in the house and who's coming out of the house. Is that the same person? Or are there two people? Who are these people? Why are they there? So there's just so many unanswered questions and so many ways that they didn't follow protocol. I, have researched now about first responders on the scene, and I have a friend who's a captain. He's retired for a fire department. And I asked him, would the firemen ever be turned away in a situation like that? And he said, absolutely not. We would attempt we would assess, the victim, and then we would attempt life-saving measures. And he said, even if the person was, not being saved, able to be saved, sometimes they're an organ donor. And for that reason, we would always attempt to do the life-saving measures. And so, again, why did they not follow protocol? Now, one of the things I want to tell you about the scene being secure is that this new rookie, poor guy, He is assigned to do the entry log. So he is standing at the front door and he is noting who goes in and who goes out and what time they do so. 30 officers went in and out of that scene. I think about 18 or 20 of them prior to the evidence technician even arriving. There are 4 pages of call logs, of entry logs. And I've got one that Shirley's going to show you. And just keep in mind, that's one of 4. These are the officers that, that went in and out of the scene, the beginning of 4 pages. So that scene really wasn't secure. Why were medical personnel not allowed in? This is a big breach of a person's rights. It's just shocking. It's just shocking. It really is. I want to talk next about that. Jason died on August 5th. And 7 days before that, there was an occurrence on Maui. And a federal agent, alcohol, tobacco, and firearms, special agent John Boss III, died of an accidental gunshot wound in the Kihei police station. The Kihei is one of, I believe it's 6 stations. It's one of the 3 main ones. He died apparently in one of the offices in there of an accidental gunshot wound with a rifle, I heard, in the police station. Is there any correlation to Jason's death? I don't know. All I know is it's a fact that he died in this very strange way. And 7 days later, Jason is dead. There was another death at the same time that did receive quite a bit of publicity. And unfortunately, I don't have the exact dates, but this man, they aren't sure exactly the date of his death, but it's something like between the 4th and the 7th or something like that. His name was Julian Hayward. He's an African-American man. And he died, they found him allegedly hanging on his porch. So an African-American man allegedly hung himself on his porch. And this happened perhaps the same day as Jason. I don't know. Sometime between, like I said, the dates, which somewhere like the 4th to the 7th. And I apologize for not having the exact dates. A lot of the community was really concerned about that death as well. That's 3 deaths, 2 of law enforcement within a week. That's pretty shocking. It's not a very big island. So, I requested in December, and this is before I had more evidence, but I had looked over the police report and saw the deficiencies. My daughter's name was wrong. Not wrong like she used to have that name. Wrong as she's never had that name. And Jason's place of birth was wrong. There was a number of factual things, but there were other things in there that were very alarming. So there was an officer, and he stated that Jason came to his house 2 days before his death. He was acting strange. He appeared to be on some kind of drugs. And Jason couldn't have been there. That story is totally fabricated. Jason was at someone's house doing handyman work. He had texted with his sister. They had talked on the phone. That's where he was that day. And this other officer couldn't have confused the days because it was the weekend the days before that. And remember, I told you Jason was doing a party for his wife. That was on Saturday. On Friday, he had signed for that mortgage. On Sunday, he helped a neighbor move. Then on Monday, his last day of a 2-week vacation, he's working at someone's house doing plumbing or some kind of handyman work for a family friend, which he always did for people, wouldn't take any money. And then the next day he goes back to work 1 shift at night. And that's the day they have the send off for the for the federal agent, special agent, John Bost. And then the next morning he's dead. Doesn't make any sense. So when I asked for that new investigation, I cited some of these things. And I was told by the captain in charge of the investigative division that no stone had been left unturned. Now remember, no one talked to any of our family and interviewed them. His medical records were not ever requested to see if there was some kind of depression, some kind of, illness, a reason that he would take his life, since that's what they were alleging. No stone left unturned. One of their own officers. Now, everyone deserves a proper investigation. Any criminal or any missing person deserves that. This is what our police function is. And you know, it appears that many times the people in Maui don't get that. They don't get return calls. They're told there's no new information if they're even responded to. They're not provided with even the basic information sometimes, like police reports. I don't understand it. You know, these are victims' families. You know, they have loved ones that are either, you know, missing or are victims of crimes, and they get no cooperation. It just makes no sense. So we got a new chief on Maui in December. I was very encouraged. Yay, we have somebody new coming in. He's not even from the islands. Maybe he's going to objectively look at this situation. So I made an appointment to meet with him, and we met. And I made that appointment like about 30 days ahead. On the morning of our appointment, somebody from his office, he had them call me and say that they needed to move the appointment up 30 minutes because he had somebody else that he needed to meet with. Now, keep in mind, I've had this appointment for 30 days. And he needed to meet with these people because they're coming from a long way. Now, you know, Maui's not very big, so maybe they're coming from Hana. That's about as far as you can come if you're on island. I was like, wow, I was really shocked. So when we finally got on the meeting, I had 13 minutes. That's all I was allotted to talk to him about my son's death, one of their officers. He told me he would look things over, and I asked him at the minimum, would he please interview at least one family member, like Jason's sister, who saw him the night before, about 14 hours before his death. And about 30 days later, I got a response, and the response was nothing to see here. This investigation is proper. It was thorough, and end of story. He did not interview anyone. He didn't give the time to call one family member. And like I said, he's got that information. That was really disheartening. And my last email to him after that, asking questions, went unanswered. I know of at least 30 people who have written to him for various reasons that he has not responded to. And I don't understand it. This isn't about me bashing the police chief. It's about not understanding why families are not getting the basic courtesy for their loved ones that have either gone missing or, you know, suffered from victims of crime. It's just shocking. You know, I also contacted the mayor. You name him, I've called them, or I'm emailed. The mayor, the county council, which is our government in Maui, the prosecuting attorney's office, our governor, representatives, you name it, I've contacted them. Most cases I have not received any response at all. And I want to talk about one in particular, in that the prosecuting attorney's office. Jason was a DUI officer, which means he was in court a lot of the times. I talked to a couple of these prosecuting attorneys, and they said, I knew Jason well. He was a really nice guy. You know, we did a lot of cases, of course, you know, together because we work with the police. One of them in particular, who had known Jason pretty well, they'd gone to a training together, told me, I can't do anything about this because it would be a conflict of interest. I don't understand that. I thought that the prosecuting attorney's role was to prosecute crimes, and they also investigate crimes. They have an investigative division. How can it be a conflict of interest when they know that there is an apparent crime? Those photographs are there. They don't lie. People can talk and say things and lie, but photos don't lie. Those injuries are there. And it would be a conflict of interest. To me, that's shocking. And that's a failure of our system and of, you know, what we have available to us. You know, I'm going to finish up with a couple things. I don't know what it's going to take for the families on Maui to get the help that they need for law enforcement. I can tell you this, I'm not going to stop. I'm not going to give up, you know, and it, you know, all of us, our cases are tragic. In my case, I do know where my son is. You know, what happened to him is horrific, but I really feel for people. And I can't say I understand what it's like to not know where your loved one is and what happened to them. I can't say I know what that feels like. It's different. And it's equally as horrendous, you know, and there's so many families, there's so many missing people. And I've done a little analysis, and my numbers might be a little bit off, but of the ones that are listed on the Maui Police Department website, of which the newest one, who went missing in May, is not listed. He's not on there. I have no idea why. It's May. I mean, it's August already. 70% of them are Caucasian males. That is not representative and does not coincide with the demographics of Maui. You know, Caucasian males do not make up 70% of the population on Maui. Clearly there's a problem here, you know, and, and there's just similarities with a lot of the cases, and I won't go into that. But, you know, it's really concerning. You know, we've had a couple deaths on Maui just in the last month or so that are really horrific. One of them, the person was in a park on a major road. Kids walked to school and saw this. And the condition that that person was in, and the condition that another person was in Paia, and I'm not going to go into details, this is alarming. And on one of them, they said it was a suicide. And there's like, no way. There's like, it's not possible. So I don't know what's happening. I can't draw conclusions. All I can say is that these facts exist. And what do they point to? And what do we need to do to get change? The other thing I want to say is that anyone, any of the families, you know, and I have talked with Shirley and I've talked a little with Karen. My heart goes out to all the people because I know on some level what it's like, because I'm suffering from that same lack of, or not lack, but apathy from the police department of not, you know, responding to the families, not doing thorough investigations, even when it's their own officer. Any of the families that would ever want to talk to me, I'm there for you. I don't have all the answers, but I have gotten a lot of the information for Jason's case. I've gotten the police report. I've gotten all the photos. I've gotten the 911 calls. I've gotten the body cams. I got his call logs. I also got some internal affairs files. There's a lot of things that we have a right to, and we don't know how to necessarily navigate it. And so I'm learning as I go. There's no manual. There's no manual for this, but I'm happy to help anyone. So just wanted people to know that my door is always open. You know, I can be reached through Instagram. And we'll put up on the screen, I have an Instagram account for Jason. It's called Truth for Jason Thompson. And I actively post on there, and I put lots of information. There's a lot of short videos with even more information than I've given you today. And you can reach me there. And, you know, no one should have to go through this. And I don't know what, like I said, what it's going to take, but, you know, the dedicated families, we loved our loved ones. You know, we want to find out what happened. Our loved ones deserve the truth. They deserve to be treated like human beings. They deserve to have the dignity, and they have no voice. We have to be their voice. So there's the account for Jason, Truth for Jason Thompson. And I so appreciate whoever's listened tonight. I so appreciate Shirley and Karen giving me the forum and other families the forum to do this. It's really appreciated. Mahalo.
You're so welcome, Judy. And I want to thank you for coming on. In any way we can help you and help anyone else get answers that they need, we're happy to do so. And we'd love to have you back on. I'm sure you have more things that you would love to share, as do Karen does as well. I know Judy does. I do. So we will definitely all be back at different times with updates and different videos with more information to share, because I don't think we've all shared everything that we have. But thank you so much.
Thank you, Shirley, for doing this for the families.
Oh, you're so welcome. And we will get this posted up for you, and we will hopefully get some results.
Thank you again.
Okay, you're so welcome. We always end the broadcast with a hui hui.
Hui hui. And aloha.
Thank you. Aloha.
Thank you.